Welcome, everyone. We'll just let people give a few minutes to pop on in and we'll get started. Hello, all. Just giving a few folks a chance to pop in, so we will get started in just a moment. Hey, let's dive in. We have so much good stuff to cover today. So, hello and welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you for taking a few moments out of your day, a few long moments, actually. We have a lot of good stuff here. So we're excited to welcome you to our webinar, Bringing Us Together Through Innovative Benefits. I'm Jill Crawford. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Celerix. And before I introduce our wonderful speakers today, I did want to just cover just a few housekeeping bits. The first is this event is being recorded. We will send out a copy to all registrants via email shortly after the presentation. And then sprinkled throughout the event, there's a few poll questions. We'd love for you to engage and answer those as you can. And then, of course, we'll have time for questions and answers post-event. To participate, you're going to want to go ahead and go into the Q&A widget in Zoom webinar, and that will be how you can answer your questions. And we'll go through as many as we can, and that's it. All right, well, let's introduce, now that housekeeping is out of the way here, let's introduce our wonderful speakers. So first joining us today is Joe Fernandez, who is our Chief Strategy Officer at Celerix. And as the founder of TBX, Joe has a very impressive 39-year track record in insurance and employee benefits. He's a very respected authority in the field and holds a number of esteemed professional designations, including the Chartered Life Underwriter and Registered Health Underwriter, showcasing his just amazing commitment to excellence. And a fun fact about Joe is his passion for aviation is evident through his impressive collection of over 6,500 pilot hours. And I feel like you probably even have more than that now, Joe. And then our next speaker today is Charlene Lobby, joining us from HR Bartender. And Charlene is an author, speaker, and consultant. She was named a top HR digital influencer and is best known for her work on HR Bartender, a blog and podcast focused on being a friendly place to talk about workplace issues. HR Bartender has been recognized as one of the top 5 blogs by HR professionals in the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM as we all know, and the best business blog by the Stevie Awards. Publications such as Reuters, New York Times, ABC News, The Wall Street Journal have sought out her expertise on topics related to human resources and the workplace. Charlene is also the author of The Recruiter's Handbook, a complete guide for sourcing, selecting, and engaging the best talent, and the SHRM Essential Guide to Talent Management, which are all available on Amazon. And Charlene's fun fact, which I have to say I share myself, is her personal goal is to find the best cheeseburger on the planet. So I love that. And with introductions, housekeeping complete, I am going to pass it over to Charlene. Oh, you're on mute, Charlene.
Darn it all. If that's the worst thing that happens, it's the very beginning. We got it out of the way, so we're
I
good to go
agree.
now. As Jill mentioned, our agenda for today is to talk about strategies for selecting benefits that support the life cycle of employees. We'll talk about building a strong education strategy and how we can communicate benefits by meeting employees where they are. The first thing that we want to do, though, is I want to spend some time talking about when we craft a benefit strategy, why is that important? And often when we're thinking about our benefit strategy and why it's important, we have a tendency, I know as an HR pro, it was like, okay, how can I make everybody happy? Everybody is so different. And this focus on differences. We want to take a different approach today and talk about the things that are the same. When we think about the employee experience and we think about the employee life cycle, everybody wants to work for a company that they can be proud of. And when employees do work for a company that they can be proud of, you'll see that they're twice as likely to stay with their employer. That, employees, no matter who they are, want to do work that feeds into their talents. And when they do produce great work, they're 18 more times to be productive because they're doing work that they enjoy. They want to work for a manager that supports them because when you work with a manager that supports you in your career, employees are 54% more likely to be engaged. And what does this have to do with benefits? Well, if I work for a company that I'm proud of and I'm doing work that aligns with my talents and my manager supports me, then my benefits package, my compensation package, which includes benefits, it makes me more connected and happy about my rewards package. So if I'm happy with my rewards package, happy with the company that I work with, then 75% of the time I'm going to stay. Versus if I'm not happy with all of these other things, then I might not be happy with my benefits package too. And that's why we want to have this conversation today. What is it that we can do? How can we build a benefits strategy that allows us to meet with employees no matter where they are in the employee life cycle? So when I was thinking about how to develop a strategy, one of the things that came to mind is I'm not a person that likes to recreate things. So I went to a model that I use frequently, and it's called the ADDIE model. And I'm from Florida. And just as a little factoid about this, the ADDIE model was created by Florida State University back in the 1970s to design military training. And some of you might be familiar with the ADDIE model because it's often used in designing like learning programs, training programs. But I like to use it for anything that I'm designing because the model seems to work. So we're going to use the ADDIE model as a way to develop our benefits strategy. The ADDIE model is assessment, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And Joe and I are going to walk through all of those components together. But before we do, Jill, let's do a little poll to get us started.
Let's do it. All right.
And this poll has to do with stay interviews.
All right.
So if you'll take a moment, we would love for you to answer this question. How does your organization conduct stay interviews? Yes, you do, and you've gained a lot of valuable information from them. Yes, but we could do better where stay interviews are concerned. No, but you're considering the stay interview. And maybe the last response is we need to learn more about them.
Yeah. And I mean, while the responses are coming in, by the way, which love to see that engagement. And the notion of stay interviews is an interesting one. And while we're waiting for the team to pop in here, Charlene and Joe, what would you say the benefits of stay interviews are? And perhaps Charlene, you can kind of kick us off there.
Yeah, when I think about stay interviews, let me back up and say, when I think about exit interviews, I think about a conversation with an employee that's leaving the organization. So if they want to say the benefits could be better or this could be improved, they're already leaving. So one of the things that a stay interview can do is help the organization recognize its strengths. And there are lots of different ways that you can do this. You could do it in a one-on-one conversation. You could ask a question in an employee engagement survey that says, what's one thing the company shouldn't stop doing? I know that's a double negative, but you get my point. But identify those things that the company does well, because you can use them for recruitment marketing. You can keep it in mind. Joe, you and I have been talking about this as we were planning our conversation. You can make sure that the executive team knows those things that the employees place a high value on.
Yeah, indeed. And definitely gain the opportunity to drill down a little bit. As an example, if someone says that they like one of their benefit offerings, well, what in particular about that benefit offering is what they like? Take the opportunity to learn the things that, from at least from a benefit perspective, that employees like, and making sure that those don't get lost in the shuffle when benefit design changes have to be made, and things like that.
Love it. All right, let's end this poll and let's share some results. What are we thinking, folks?
I see that, when you're kind of looking over half of listeners are thinking about it, maybe wanting to learn a little bit more about stay interviews and the value that they can bring. I will say one of the things that I've done with stay interviews is you find out that top 10 list of the things that employees love, put it in your recruitment marketing. Think of it like a for employees, by employees. This is what employees say are the great things about working here. And if your current employees love it, there's a possibility that job candidates are going to love it too.
Love that. So you're saying think like a marketer, Charlene. As a
Exactly.
marketer.
Exactly.
All right, let me stop sharing here and let's get back into it.
So let's talk about step number 1, which is assessing the organization. I will say it might be really tempting to say, we know the organization, we don't need to take time to do an assessment. Let me suggest this doesn't have to be a big, drawn out, elaborate process, but take a pause and evaluate where you are. some of this information that you might use in an assessment is maybe already available to you. It could be the organization does a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and you might have some information there that you can use as part of your assessment. The other thing that you can do is look at what's called a PESTLE analysis. PESTLE is also an acronym: political, environmental, social, technological, legal, and environmental. But it gives you an opportunity to look at what's going on around you and your competitive set. When I think of competition, I think of not only internal competition like benchmarking, this is where we were last year and this is where we are this year. And you might think of your competition as your industry set, but I also think of competition from a geographic standpoint, especially if you have a lot of jobs that have transferable skills. Like, I've worked in some hotels where we didn't have a lot of competing hotels around us, but we did have restaurants and bars and landscaping companies. So people didn't leave us to go to another hotel. They went to other companies that had something similar from a transferable skills perspective. So assess your organization and where they are, and look at your key talent metrics. When we talk about benefits, one of the things that we want to do from our benefits package is attract and retain talent. So what are your current talent metrics telling you? We mentioned stay interviews. What's your turnover look like? What's your time to fill? If you made some changes to your benefit process, would it increase time to fill? What's your cost per hire? Is it possible, if we made some subtle changes to our benefits processes, that cost per hire would go down? What do people tell you? Joe was just making the comment about doing that deeper dive. When we look at people who decline offers with us, do they explain why? They might say, oh, it's your benefits package. Well, what about our benefits package is it that individuals are apprehensive about? And take all this information in before we move to the next step in the process. But I want to give Joe, because I just mentioned Joe's comment about doing a deeper dive. Joe, do you want to talk a little bit more about that and the assessment phase?
For sure. And the thing about here is that the assessment now, and certainly taking it to the next step, particularly when it comes to from a benefits perspective, you mentioned benchmarking. Traditionally in the employee benefits world, you have employers and their advisors that do benchmarking. And a lot of times the benchmarking, just like you just mentioned, it has to do, it's industry based. But it needs to, in today's world and in today's dynamic workforce, it needs to go deeper than that. It's not just what industry. Yes, because you have certain industry-based workforces that have talents that are needed in those areas, but you also have many other individuals that have different talents and different functions that are applicable across industry. But then you also look at the geographic area, right? An industry that's located, a tech industry that's located in Dallas, Texas, may be quite a bit different from an environment standpoint and a location standpoint than San Francisco. Same with manufacturing. It may look, the workforce may look a certain way if that manufacturing firm is in Chicago, and look completely different than if it's in Mobile, Alabama. So going deeper into the benchmarking, into other factors other than just industry, is very important these days. And then one step further is the dynamic of the employee themselves. And I'm talking going even beyond just basic demographics, age, gender, those types of factors, even deeper. Look at the analysis of demographics and correlate benefit offerings to that demographic. For example, what percentage of the population have school-age dependents? What percentage of your population doesn't? What percentage of your population have different locations within a metropolitan area? What percentage of your population is remote, and in what their geographic area is, and how that benchmarking concerns there. So it's, the days of having a company and having most of your employees, if not all in your employees, in one geographic area is certainly a thing of the past. And no two companies from the same industry have the same look or demographic of their employee count. Some can be completely different, a much younger workforce versus a much older, or a more diverse workforce versus others. So those are elements that, in doing benchmarking and assessment, needs to take it to the next step, so that a benefit design program correlates to that and matches more to the needs and the adhesion that the employees have for those benefit programs.
The next step in the process is to design goals and objectives. Before we can think about designing the program, we want to think about what's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? And as I mentioned, we could be talking about, hey, we want to attract more people to jobs. We want to retain our workforce. We'll design our program goals and objectives. Those are going to be important not only in program design, but when we get to the final step of evaluation. I do think it's really important to point out, when we're talking about goals and objectives, organizations do not have to be the biggest and best at everything. So when you're sitting there and you're making these decisions about your benefit packages, it isn't about being the biggest and the best. It's about coming up with a cohesive employee value proposition that's going to include benefits that you can sell as part of the recruitment process. And I want to share with you a couple of examples to illustrate. I used to work for an airline. And if you're not aware of it, one of the benefits of working for an airline is that you get to fly for free. So a lot of people will apply because they want to fly, they want to travel, and that's great. However, when I worked for the airline, we would tell people, hey, yeah, you're right, you get to fly for free, but guess what? You'll have more opportunities to fly for free than you will get days off. This isn't about unlimited time off plus fly for free. It's about balancing it out. And the same holds true. I used to work in a hotel that, based upon my position in the hotel, I got to stay at other hotels in the chain for free. I got, free dry cleaning. I could eat in the restaurant for free. I could, it had a golf course. I got golf lessons for free. I'm not any good at golf, but I got free golf lessons. But the point is, did I make the biggest salary I've ever made in my career? No. Did I get all of these other things? Yes. So when you're thinking about your program goals and objectives, it's important to step back and say, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the message that we want to send to employees when we're recruiting, when we're talking with them, through orientation and onboarding and training and their career, and even to retain employees along the way. So Jill, I was going to say Joe. Jill,
The J.
let's do just Jay. That's it.
We have another one.
Let's talk about another poll.
Let's do it. All right. Launch this guy. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that.
So in this poll, we'd love to know how you evaluate employee benefits, by utilization, by participation, employee comments, recruitment and retention, organizational culture, or some other way?
This is an interesting question too. The numbers are jumping all over the place, so there's a lot of thoughts on this one. And Joe, I know this is something that's really near and dear to your heart as well. When you think of utilization, the fact of how many people are using the program, and then the participation, the enrollment side, how do you see that differing from a measurement perspective?
Well, first of all, the polls like this are great, but it's also great to really understand, the context of which they're made. Participation in and of itself, if it's low, does not necessarily mean that the program is poor or that the employees don't like it. It could very well mean that there isn't enough engagement or education for employees to make a good decision about it. Same with utilization. Low utilization may not necessarily mean that the plan itself is not useful. It may mean that there isn't enough education around, year-round education and communication, and maybe information that allows employees to understand how something is utilized and what the benefit may be. So things like these are very interesting because it allows you to get some general information and then start taking it to the next step to analyze in particular what those outcomes are doing for you.
Let's share these results here. Neck and neck on the top, huh? Interesting. All right, I'm going to stop that and then we'll carry on with our regularly scheduled program.
Well, certainly taking it to the next level of strategic benefit design, as we mentioned earlier, going even beyond benchmarking is really breaking down an element that I like to call life stages. And I think that when you take demographics and you run it through some analysis, and there are several tools out there available to help you identify this, the easiest way to look at it is breaking down the life stages of your employee population. How many would be considered family first? Starting with young families, priorities are about the family and the home front. How many individuals are goal-oriented and their world is more about achieving certain goals and accomplishments? How many are in a population, of the percent of the population that don't know what they want, or have a I'll deal with it later kind of mentality, or it's not my problem yet? Those types of things allow you to offer a broad range of offering, but then give them the education that's catered to those life stages and let them make a decision for themselves. So, for example, if you have a program that's really designed for family first individuals, how do you communicate that so that it's related for family first, right? Does this benefit match the needs for those individuals? And do I have other benefits or different designs of those benefits that meet some of the other segments of the population? So the bottom line is flexibility and personalization. Allow benefit designs to be altered or packaged to meet the needs of those folks that are in that environment.
As we get into developing our benefits program, our benefits strategy, having goals is going to help when the organization wants to go out and search for benefit partners. Your benefit partners are going to want to know, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to do? And by having those pre-established goals, knowing where you are, what do you want your goals to be, they will be able to help you in putting together proposals and designing things that are going to be beneficial to the organization and employees. There are two things to keep in mind as you're starting to engage with benefit partners and put together your actual plans. And that is, organizations can run into challenges if you overbuy or you underbuy. I'll give you a great example of overbuy, and I'm going to tattle on myself in the process, and we'll talk a little bit about technology. If you have ever watched a technology presentation, like maybe for your phone, where you're watching the presentation and you're like, ooh, yes, I need a new phone. Look at all of the fancy things that the phone can do. And then you buy that new phone and you don't use like 50% of all of those things that they talked about during that presentation. This is where organizations can end up overspending and not having monies to do other things. So be careful when you're out there talking with people about buy what you need, but be careful about overbuying. The other thing is reverse is also true. You might be watching the budget, and companies always watch their budget, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But think about your growth. Think about where you want to be. Joe was talking about what your workforce looks like, and meeting your workforce where they are. Well, this is where your workforce is today. Where's your workforce going to be in 2 years? And are you buying in a way that as your workforce grows, they will move into these benefits seamlessly? So as you're thinking about your strategy, don't overspend, but also don't underspend. Create that balance so your organization can deliver benefits to employees where they are. The last thing to think about as you're developing the program is who's going to be the point of contact inside your organization for benefits administration. If you're a big company and you have a dedicated benefits function, then that can be great. You might have people who are going to be that first line, that if people have questions or there's something about an invoice or you need to talk with accounting, then someone can do that. But I have to admit, I've worked for large companies that on site, we did not have a dedicated benefits representative. And who's going to handle the day-to-day conversation? And who's going to be in a position to answer questions and things like that. Just as a little side note, I worked for a company when I worked for the airline, we were making a change to our benefits program. And it was kind of interesting because we were making a change to go from 100% employee coverage. The company covered 100% of the employee's premium to the employee had to pay $10. And employees were livid that they were going from 100% to having paid $10. But one of the things that we did in rolling this out was we got employees together and they went through training with the HR team. So there was this handful of employees who went through benefits training with the HR team, and they got to ask all the questions, and they became our in the workforce experts about the benefits program. And what was cool about it is if an employee brought something up that wasn't correct, like in the cafeteria when nobody from HR is around to correct them, when they would bring something up, another employee, their peer would say, look, I went through the training. That's not true. That's not the way that it works. Having internal subject matter experts outside of the human resources department can help with your benefits administration. something to think about as you're putting your strategy together. How do we know, Joe has mentioned several times in his comments about education. How do we know that people are getting good information to make benefits related decisions?
And that's when we talk about, meeting the employees where they are. Now that you design a benefit package that meets the needs of your employee population, that matches a program that has a competitive advantage from a recruitment and retention program, the next big part of it is how do the employees learn about it, and how do they have the tools that they need to make the right decisions and to make the right confident decisions. It's almost like too many employers we sometimes see spend a lot of time in designing packages and really meeting budgetary requirements and making sure that coverages meet the overall goals as we just talked about, but then leave the enrollment, communication, and education component of it as the last step, the forgotten step. The almost like, well, we don't have time for that, so we'll do it next year type of an approach. That's almost like building a competitive race car that is confident that will win a race or be very competitive in that race, but going out with 3 of the 4 tires flat. In other words, where the rubber meets the road, where that employee is engaged in that education process, is engaged in making that decision and learning about the benefits, being an afterthought. And really, it really creates the scenario that all the work that you do will fall apart because it's not connected to the employee. We know now that self-service, when an employee, the go-to methodology, the go-to way employees like to interact, certainly with anything related to benefits, but in all aspects of consumerism, if you will, is self-service. Employees like to learn, not to be sold. They like to be educated and then make a decision based on that. They like to learn self-pace. And in any given environment, you have different levels of education, different levels of knowledge that the employee may have about a particular benefit or benefit program. The important thing here is to create an environment that gives employees a multifaceted way of consuming that knowledge, that education. And it needs to be engaging. So they need to be able to have a situation where they can learn as much as they want or as little as they need to make a confident decision. And that's the big thing there, is confident decision. Self-service has been the wave of the future and what the preferred methodology that employees like to engage with. But however, most self-service systems, most technology platforms out there lack the learning component, the engagement component, the confidence building component for an employee. And while there are a lot of different solutions out there to do that, the most important thing and the most effective way is to give the employees a journey, an enrollment and education journey where in one place they learn everything they need to know to make a confident buying decision. Similar to how employees buy other things. Think about some of the things that we as consumers buy. Amazon's is a quick example of that. If I know I want to buy a particular product and I log on to Amazon, on that one journey in Amazon, I can learn everything there is to learn about a product. I have how-to videos. I have ratings. I have comments from other consumers that have made purchases of that nature. I also have other products that are related, that people buy, that are related to that particular product that I'm looking at. In essence, everything I need is on one screen, and when I'm ready to buy, I click a button and I make that purchase. Too many HR platforms and employee benefit platforms today are really nothing more than text and radio buttons. It's important to look for systems that give you robust educational experience that give that employee that journey to make that confident purchasing decision.
A few other things to add when we're talking about implementing the program. If you are in the process of adding a benefit, you'll want to highlight that there's a new benefit there that employees who feel that they have a lot of knowledge about the existing benefits package, they might say, hey, there's a new benefit, I need to learn about it. Is a benefit being changed? Is there a key component of the benefit that's changing? I've seen some organizations maybe say in the new calendar year, the deductibles will be different, or in the new calendar year, maybe copays will be different. But if you're changing an existing benefit, is that change being highlighted? And then finally, and this might involve a contact with your legal counsel, is the organization sunsetting a benefit? So you might be adding a benefit, but you're also changing a benefit that maybe some people are using, you're sunsetting a piece of it. As Joe mentioned, communication is key. You can do, I'm an advocate of doing things in all the formats, because when we talk about benefits communication, we don't have to wait until once a year during open enrollment to talk about benefits communication. We can bring the benefits conversation into every day, all along. You know, we want people to use their benefits all year long, so let's talk about benefits all year long. Things that are in written and verbal formats. We might do articles, we might have a benefits fair outside of open enrollment. Maybe we used to do benefits fairs where we had employees verify their tax information or their paycheck address or things like that, so for auditing purposes. You could do things in person and online. One of the things that I've heard from employees is companies that do online education sessions that allows them to have family members with them. So if the employee is not the person who typically manages, benefits information in the family, then sometimes the employee is placed in a position where they have to go to the meeting, take the notes, take them home, present them to the family, have a discussion, and then come back and fill out all the forms. Depending upon how you set up your communication, it's possible that there could be some online meetings that family members could be a part of. And that way they hear firsthand information that could have an impact in their decision-making process. The other thing that's really cool with today's technology, we have the ability to do webinars. We might be able to reach out to our broker and partner with them on a webinar that could reside in our intranet, and employees could access it whenever they want. We could do an internal podcast where we talk with our broker or people that can share information. And think about whether or not there are some strategic opportunities to promote these different conversations. So for example, we might have communications that are specifically designed for orientation and onboarding, but there could also be some benefits that employees get when they get promoted. And we might want to put together a package or a series that when someone gets promoted, that they know about these additional benefits that they might have access to. So think about all the different touch points or milestones throughout an employee's career where they might want information. And that includes offboarding. When people are leaving the organization, they have benefits related questions, and they're going to want to know those too.
I would also say for sure that this is not a once a year strategy or a twice a year strategy. It's an ongoing strategy. And I think it's important to have tools that make it efficient for you to communicate and provide this communication information, education information throughout the year, and tools that give you feedback on the level of engagement that the employees are having with these tools. Are they opening their emails? Are they acting on the call of actions of the information throughout the year? If you provide a reminder about a particular benefit that's available to them, and you reminded them 6 months after open enrollment, are they taking advantage? Is that showing a bump in utilization or a bump in participation? That's how you really create a much more well-rounded assessment for a particular program for when you're designing the following year's plan designs and goals for the benefit program. Once a year is just not enough anymore. It needs to be ongoing throughout the year, and a platform that allows you to do that certainly makes it more efficient and provides more feedback. And so now you've assessed your program, you've designed your program, you're going to implement your program. How do we, and part of that implementation is that communication. And now you've decided, as we've just mentioned, that the communication is a multifaceted level. It's webinars, it's print materials, it's video, it's benefit fairs. It's technology. It's when that enrollment is occurring, that enrollment experience, that journey, if you will. But then how do you make that communication? How do you take it to the next step and make it even more effective? And the big way, I believe, I mentioned life stages earlier. People are in different parts of their lives, are in different stages of their lives. And if you have 2 or 3 or 4 different life stages in a particular organization, in theory, you should have 4 or 5 different versions of that communication material that engage that individual in that life stage. And let me give you a perfect example. During an enrollment journey, if you're explaining how a benefit works, and maybe that benefit has a feature that allows for an employee to pay for the medical bills of one of their dependents if they broke an ankle playing soccer. Well, that's only relevant to the people that actually have dependents. It's not necessarily relevant to someone who doesn't have any children. So make the communication relevant to that particular employee's life stage. That's how you increase the level of engagement in this process. And it's no secret, a high level engagement creates a high level of education. A high level of education builds the confidence for that employee to make not only a good buying decision, but a good buying decision with good participation and good utilization. And doing this throughout the year. So design's important, communication's important. How you communicate is also important. That's the next level. Speak to the voice of that employee population and make it personalized to that extent. Luckily today, there's lots of technology and tools available that can do this in a very efficient, very economical way. And not only using AI, but even using other tools that are available even today that allow you to do these things relatively easily and quickly.
So when you're wrapping up your design, well, you're wrapping it up and you're not at the same time. During the evaluation stage, you'll want to regularly go through and evaluate your progress towards goals. At the beginning of this process, when we were designing our benefits strategy, we said there are certain things that we are trying to accomplish. Well, This is the point in the process where we're going to go back and say, are employees enrolling in the benefit? Are they using the benefit? Do they have an opinion about the benefit? What is the impact on our talent metrics? Does that benefit help us attract talent? Does it help us engage talent? Is it helping us retain talent? And this will allow us, when we're talking with our benefits partners, to say, maybe we want to make a little change. Maybe we want to add an extra component. But going through and regularly evaluating, where are we with regard to the benefit and the goals that we originally established. Not only does that allow us to know that employees are pleased with the benefits package, but it lets us know that we're spending our money wisely. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Benefits are an investment, and we want it to be a good investment. And that's what this really comes down to. That's what this evaluation phase is all about. Are we creating something that allows us to accomplish our goals?
Indeed, and I would say in as part of that evaluating process, and certainly evaluating the benefit enrollment process, I believe there needs to be a level of consistency from year to year. If you do something well and people like it, sometimes we tend to not do it the following year, or we get into this concept of this year we'll have an active enrollment and do a lot of education and have employees actively participate in electing or rejecting certain benefits. But then next year, we'll do a passive enrollment. Sometimes we believe that if we're not making any benefit changes, if our plan designs are not going to change from one year to the next, or if our rates and contributions are not going to change, we can just conduct a passive enrollment so there's no real change. The reality, though, is that while the benefit designs have not changed or changed very little, employees' lives change all the time. Throughout the year, you have many employees that have had changes in their lives, whether it's new dependents or removal of dependents, whether it's marriages or divorce. And while there is qualifying life events that can occur throughout the year and people take advantage of it, sometimes these changes are not qualifying to begin with. They're just life changes in general, new hires that come on board. So having an active, engaged enrollment every year gives you the feedback that you need from year to year that allows you to evaluate whether the enrollment is effective and whether these plan designs and plan strategies are effective, regardless of any particular changes that are done. Just because an employee's, also keep this in mind, I believe, if an employee comes to you and say, well, I just want to have what I have last year, I wouldn't necessarily consider that as being a message that they love what they have. I would suggest that maybe they don't have enough tools to make a different decision. Maybe they don't have enough tools to be confident that what they really need is what they have or need to make a change of. Sometimes us as consumers, it's human nature. If we don't understand something, we just revert back to what we have or revert to a no. But giving them these tools and having them actively engage year after year to address their lives changes throughout the year certainly gives them the opportunity to maintain that level of confidence in making their enrollment journey as effective as possible.
Quick recap. The steps that we talked about in building a benefits strategy include assessing the organization and where are we right now, designing the goal of the program, developing the materials or the content that we will be offering, implementing that, and a huge piece of that being the communication piece, and then finally wrapping up with regularly evaluating our progress towards goals. So where do we go from here? Well, we want to start by building support within the organization. Your organization right now you might be saying to yourself, hey, we've already got something in place. There's no reason to think about anything until, end of the year, open enrollment time, whenever your open enrollment might be. But now is the time to start building support for developing a strategy, reevaluating the strategy that you currently have. So don't feel that you have to wait to budget season to start initiating these conversations. Work the plan. Put together a strategy, and you might say, hey, we can skip a couple of steps. We know what we're doing, but take a moment and pause. You don't have to have big, elaborate steps, but take a moment and pause along the way and work the whole plan. I do have to tell you a story. One of the hotel companies that I worked for, we had this fantastic tuition reimbursement policy. It was beautiful. And the company allocated a large sum of money towards tuition reimbursement. And we would regularly go through and look at the spend, and nobody was using it. So we were like, all right, we need to do something because, from my standpoint, that's money just sitting on the table, not getting spent. So we went out and started talking with employees, and they're like, yeah, it's a great policy. We like it and everything. But they eventually said, Charlene, here's the thing. We don't really want to go back to school. We're more concerned about getting our kids into school than us. So we went back as a leadership team and we made a few, adjustments to the plan, and we added a scholarship component for the children of our employees. And the reason I'm bringing this up is there was still plenty of money there for employees who wanted to go back to school. But this extra piece was something that no one in our competitive set was doing. And the employees were thrilled because we asked them for their feedback and they gave it to us and we did something with it. So when we talk about working the plan, that's a part of working the plan. We might think we know what's best, but sometimes our employees can give us that piece of information that we need to really set our package apart. Communicate, communicate, and communicate some more. I'm going to just say this. There is nothing more infuriating for me as an HR person or an employee when they hear that we have a benefit that they didn't know about. So regularly going out and communicating with employees about the benefits package is critical. And I'm going to quote Joe as my closing remark. This is not a set it and forget it process. We need to regularly go through and monitor our benefits practices to make sure that we are creating something that's internally equitable and externally competitive. And Jill, on that note, hopefully we have time to maybe one or two questions before we wrap up.
Thinking. We'll
If I may, I would like to say one other closing comment about the now what. I would say don't go at it alone. Work with your benefits broker or benefits consultant or advisor to incorporate the strategy. Work with those advisors that have a broad scope of their services that go beyond just the nuts and bolts and mechanics of the cost and utilization of benefits, but work with them that know and have practices into implementing these strategies and working and sourcing out vendors that help bring these this well-rounded A to Z process in place.
Excellent. All right. We are officially at time, but I think we can answer just two questions as long as Joe and Charlene, you're good with that? All right.
Absolutely.
So one question, just playing with my screens here. We talked about stay interviews. One person wants to know, what role do exit interviews play in shaping a company's benefit strategy?
My opinion, and I'm going to jump in here, Joe. My opinion about exit interviews is this. One, I think it's really awesome to do exit interviews, and you should definitely ask people why they're leaving the organization. But I'm going to suggest that you ask one additional question, and that is, what started you looking in the first place? Because those are two different things. So somebody might tell you on their way out the door, hey, I'm going to work for a company. They let me work from home. They have a great benefits package. I'm going to make more money. And all of those things might be true. However, if you ask someone what started them looking, they might say, my manager is a hot mess. Okay. And that is a different response. And the company might act one way if they heard the first question, and they might act differently if they hear the second question. So organizations need to do a little bit of thought and prep into their exit interview process to make sure that they're getting good information, because you could easily dedicate your resources in the wrong direction.
And I would say stay interviews, I think, are fantastic. I mean, right off the bat, it opens up for open dialogue and a culture in the organization that sends the message that we want to learn why you're here, why you stay here, and it gives them the opportunity to say, here are the things that I would like to see, and do it before it's too late, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And we can answer one more question. This one question came in. I think this was on the D section, the Ds of your ADDIE model, Charlene, but who or what is a benefit partner?
I think of a benefit partner as, it could be my broker. It could be a technology company that I use as part of the process. So it's the individuals and the companies who help me find and administer my benefit package. I understand there's a piece that I do internally, as far as invoicing and paying the bill and answering questions, but there's a whole group of people. Joe touched upon it when we were on the what's next. There's a whole group of people who help with things like COBRA administration and, online enrollments that we don't necessarily do directly in HR. Joe, you probably might want to elaborate on this.
Well, all of those that you mentioned, I definitely would include as benefit partners. And I will also add other associates or employees within your organization that may be from a different discipline or a different part, that can also be that third party view, that an employee that that's not in the day-to-day of benefits, but is an employee and consumer of benefits, that can lend that feedback, or can be the ear to the rest of the organization. I believe that can also be a benefit partner. I would say I would call the benefit partners a team of individuals that includes all of these folks.
Great point.
All right, we should let people get on with the day. This was wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Charlene, for great insights, great dialogue. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for participating with the poll questions and asking such great questions. We will send out, again, the recording of this webinar, but thank you, everyone, for taking the time, and enjoy the rest of your day.